virtually overnight. We adopted this digital technology. And then the cell phones came, all the digital televisions came, and then the computer hit. Back in the 80s, everybody jumped into using personal computers, first with Apple and then with the IBM PC. You may all recall that. And then they did the laptop computers. Then they did all the other, overnight, everything rapidly evolved to digital. And as we changed and as we jumped into the digital age, I believe it changed the way most of us think in very subtle ways. Things started changing. For example, I remember the first telephone I ever bought where you could store telephone numbers in it. It was in the early 90s I bought a cell phone, and it had the ability to store numbers. So I sat down, took my most important phone numbers, took a few minutes, stored them into the telephone. One of those numbers was my mother and father's telephone number, which at that time I had known for over 40 years. A few weeks later, someone asked me what my parents' telephone number was. I had completely forgotten it. Any of you have that experience? I relegated it to the machine, and what did I do? Mentally let go of it, went somewhere else. I also forgot how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and so did you people. I got a little test for you. If you don't think you've been affected by these digital toys we run around with, sometime in the next 24 hours, invent for yourself a 6-digit number. Any 6-digit number you wish. 582,492. Make up a 6-digit number. Divide it by 14 longhand. First, see if you can still do it. Second, see how long it takes you. Now, we all stopped doing longhand computations a while back because all of us now have access to digital computers. We carry one in our pocket, as you've all acknowledged. Most of us have a digital calculator on our desk or a computer on our desk. We all have access to these machines that do it for us. Why do we need to do it anymore? And what's missing? What happened? Well, if you do longhand division, we have to draw that little box and carry your two and bring your numbers down. You realize there's a process between the question and the answer. You understand the process that's involved. What is the main part of a computer called? The processor. That's the part the machines are taking over. The machines now simply do the process for us so quickly that it simply spits out the answer. Put the question in, out comes the answer. Google a question, out come the links. Another example of that I used last time was my son's term paper. I have a teenage son. A few months ago, he said he had a term paper that was due in 4 days. I said, you better get on it. He said, why? I can do it in 4 hours. And I said, show me, and he did. Sat me down, went to his computer, Googled the topic, out came like 1 million links, found the links that were important, clicked them, found the information, clicked it, found the information. It instantly became obvious that he could do a rather detailed term paper in about 4 hours. I, on the other hand, never had a computer when I was in high school and college. We, in my day, had what were called libraries. If I had a term paper, I'd always give myself a week to do it. I'd have to drag myself down to the library, and remember the Dewey Decimal cards? Remember one of those big, long drawers, and go through those stupid white little cards until you found the actual source, and then you had to write down all that information, and one thing told you what row it was in, one told you what level you had to go to, and then you climb up the steps, and you go looking for the book, and you get there, and half the time it's missing because some jerk stole it, and then you got to do it all over again. You went through this big process, but when you actually got your hands on the material, you had to open the book, look through the chapters, find the relevant information, flip open the pages, breeze through the chapter till you got to the relevant information, and then either jot it down so you didn't forget it, or in our day, it was a Xerox machine that cost 25 cents a page and took about a half hour to warm up. Remember that? Now, and I would still generate the term paper. If you look at the end result, my kid's term paper is either just as good, if not better, than the one I did, but I honestly believe I understand the material at a little bit more depth than he ever will. Because what he does, once he finishes his 4-hour term paper, he gets his grade, he throws that on the pile, and then he moves on to the next challenge or the next piece of information. He is moving from point to point to point to point, which is exactly what computers do, which is exactly what you're doing. And if you don't think that's true, I'll give you another example. I'm going to presume most of you drive to work. Not everybody, of course, does, but I'm going to presume most of you in this room drive to work 5 days a week at least. If you do drive to work 5 days a week, here's the question. Try to remember the last time you drove to work. Now, if that drive took you 15 minutes from home to work, my question is, how much of that 15-minute drive can you really remember? And if you're honest with yourself, most of you are going to report that you only remember maybe 2 or 3 minutes out of that 15-minute drive. The question, of course, was, where were you the other 14, 13 minutes? Here's what most of you were doing. Thinking about what you should have done, could have done, might have done, what you think you're going to do, what you hope you're going to do, what you wish is going to happen, and totally oblivious to what you are actually doing. Which is why some of you completely drive past your exit on a freeway. How many in this room have ever experienced that? Drive right past the exit, don't see the exit signs. You drive, pull into the driveway at the end of the day, shut off the ignition, you seriously have to sit there and ask yourself, how did I get here? Which road did I just take? Some of you have your mind so far up in the clouds, you miss 90% of what's going on in your life. You think like a computer. You are thinking in frozen instants in time. Be honest. Try to remember that 15-minute drive to work, and I'll tell you what you really will remember. You'll remember the things that made you conscious. If some jerk cut you off on the freeway, you'll remember that. If you couldn't find a parking space, that you will remember. If the red light took longer than you expected it to, you'll remember that. But the rest of the time, your head was somewhere else, not even aware of what you were doing. All of that is fine and good. Another thing that happened in the 80s was the introduction of a new term I had never heard before, multitasking. First time I heard it was in the 80s after everybody started using the IBM and the Apple computers. And you talk to people, what are you doing? I'm multitasking. What does that mean? I'm thinking of 5 things at once. Well, I'm a psychologist, and I'm here to tell you, you cannot think of 5 things at once. You can think of 1 thing at a time. What you can do is take a period of time and start bouncing your attention around so fast that it gives you the appearance of thinking of 5 things simultaneously, but at any given moment, you can only process 1 stream of information. Now, when you break up that stream, you're losing a bit of the process. It's happening to us all. It's happening in a very subtle way. Another example, anybody notice there's no such thing as 60-second commercials anymore? They disappeared. You know why? None of us can concentrate for 60 seconds anymore. You put a 60-second commercial in the air, they either flip the channel or they fall asleep. They're out of it entirely. People cannot concentrate that long. Another thing that started happening in the late 80s and mid-90s, you ever notice how they've jerked that stupid camera around when you're trying to watch TV, always in motion? They never did that before. You know why they jerk that camera around now? To keep trying to grab your attention. Human attention spans have dissipated dramatically. I'll give you one last example, then make my point and move on. When I came up as a psychologist, there was no such thing as ADD. That syndrome simply did not exist. Now, there was a syndrome known as hyperkinesis, which was similar in symptoms, but there were less than 500,000 people worldwide that exhibited that hyperkinetic syndrome. Today, it is estimated by some that 1 out of 25 students are suffering from attention deficit disorder, and millions of adults are. Where did that come from? That is a direct result of this world that we find ourselves in, where we are constantly having to bounce our attention around. Not bad. It has certainly advanced us as a species. And I know what some of you folks do. You sit in front of that terminal with 18 things going across simultaneously. You know, and I live in Florida. We had the election problem during the George Bush election, and they were saying that nobody could do the chads. They didn't have to do it. And one comedian said, yeah, but you go into a bingo hall and you see these elderly handling 18 bingo cards simultaneously. You ever go into a bingo hall and watch somebody, that's high-speed processing. We are all doing it, and we are all, to a degree, suffering side effects from it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. However, and this, believe it or not, is the actual point. Turns out you folks have chosen to make your living in a profession that requires exactly the opposite type of thinking now and then. See, this company prides itself on the relationships that you develop with individual investors. Correct me if I'm wrong. isn't a big part of what you folks do, or at least are supposed to be doing, is generating a relationship with your clients, actually sitting there and listening to them, doing a fact finder and studying and understand what their individual financial wants and needs are so that you can construct for them a program or a plan that works to their benefit. Is that not what you're supposed to be doing? Remember I started out with Alan Freed, they always know when you're listening. Guess what, folks? Your clients always know when you're listening. And if they call you with a problem and you're sitting there staring at that screen or playing with your smartphone or mentally with your head up in the clouds, they know it, they feel it. You know when someone's not there and when they are. That's the antithesis of what you folks are trying to generate. And when you go into a presentation with them, or if you meet them face to face and your mind is on that jerk that cut you off on the freeway, or the fight you had with your spouse, or the really important client you've got after this one, they know it, they feel it, they sense it, and that relationship that is so crucial to success in what you folks are trying to do suffers badly. Again, I'm making the scatterbrain thinking sound negative. It is not necessarily negative. For my son to be able to do his term paper in 4 hours, and what used to take me a week, is called productivity. This is what the economists talk about when they say you can get so much more done in a shorter period of time. It's wonderful. These tools that we have at our disposal are fabulous. But all I'm saying is don't walk away from, don't completely abandon the other way of thinking. And that's what a lot of people have done. A lot of people haven't really concentrated on something in a long time. They don't read books anymore. They don't sit down and really pay attention when people are talking. All you got to do is sit out there in that cocktail hour and watch when some people are talking. You can see them staring off into space, drifting back again, looking at their watch. We zoom all over the place, head in the clouds. And it is no coincidence. Do any of you happen to know what the next generation of computing has already been labeled? Cloud computing. That is no accident. They want your head up in the clouds. They want you to be thinking like this. Cloud computing. Give me all of your information and I will store it for you. Well, where are you going to store it? Up in the clouds. Well, what does that mean? That means it'll actually be simultaneously stored bits and pieces in a variety of different servers. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's going to be everywhere at once. Well, won't other people be able to access it? Nah, trust us. Not a chance. The other side of it. Okay, now to the point. Number one, here's the really good news. I believe the more you can focus, the more time you can spend actually paying attention to that client, actually getting your head off that monitor and going out and visiting people and sitting there face to face with them, listening to them, developing relationships and talking to them or listening to them is likely to increase your effectiveness and ultimate success in this business. Does anybody in this room disagree with that? Makes sense, doesn't it? So anything you can do to, when you want to focus, when you want to sit there and pay attention, 18 things going across the screen, go right ahead and do it. But when you want to focus, wouldn't it be nice if you had that in your toolkit? The good news is you do not have to learn how to do this. You were born doing this. You were born focused. This scatterbrain stuff is just a byproduct of the culture you happen to be living in. You were born focused. Look at a 5-year-old. 5-year-olds have no problem at all putting 100% of their attention on a spot and keeping it there for a long period of time, that wide-eyed wonderment. You learned, you don't have to learn how to do this. You already know how to do this. What you need to do is kind of get back to it. Second piece of good news. There's not one universal way of doing this. There are hundreds of ways you can increase the amount of time you stay focused. Let me offer just a few of them. There are hundreds, but let me give you one that I think is particularly poignant, especially with this group. You know, they say the more things change, the more they stay the same. About 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I read a book called Acres of Diamond by a guy named Earl Nightingale. Anybody in here remember Earl Nightingale? A few of you do. Earl Nightingale wrote a series of really good motivational speaking books and motivational books, and this book, Acre of Diamonds, had a chapter in it, and Earl Nightingale was talking about how sometimes people would complain to him that they weren't getting the respect they thought they deserved. They would say things like, every time I talk, somebody interrupts me, or if I have something to say, they discount it. Nobody listens to me. Nobody pays attention to me. And Earl Nightingale said the interesting thing was that when someone would complain about that to him, he would start observing that person, and much to his surprise, he found that the person that would make that complaint often exhibited the same traits to other people. The person that complained they weren't getting the respect would be the first to interrupt somebody else, the first not to be listening, the first to be shifting around in their chair while someone was talking to them. So he came up with a little technique. He said, if anybody complained to me about not getting enough respect or people not listening to them, this was what I would advise them to do. He said, starting today, just for the next couple of days, whenever you are talking to anyone, no matter who it is, if you are communicating with that individual, be it a client or the person checking you out at the supermarket or anyone, while you're communicating with them, in the back of your mind, start repeating this phrase to yourself. Over and over, tell yourself, this is the most important person in the world. This person right now, the single most important person in the world to me. He said, try to tell yourself that over and over and over and really try to believe it while you're communicating with that individual. And he said, there are 3 reasons why you should be doing this. Reason number 1, as far as the person you're talking to is concerned, they are the most important person in the world. Reason number 2, it's the way people ought to treat each other. He said, but reason number 3, when it comes to human interactions, typically you get what you give. If you really are looking at that person, mentally telling yourself and believing that that person is the most important person in the world, here is how that changes your body language. You stop shifting around in the chair and unconsciously lean forward. You stop breaking eye contact and jerking all around and actually pay attention to that person. Your breathing pattern becomes slow and regular. Often your facial expression irons out as the tension leaves your face. Now, the person does not sit back there with a checklist saying, oh, they're no longer moving around, the eye blink has slowed down. They feel it. You feel it when someone is really listening to you. And they, in turn, turn around and give it right back to you. Now, wouldn't that be a simple thing for you to do just for the next few days? And the net result of doing that is a very simple mental exercise to train yourself to slow it all down, turn all the junk off, and focus when you really want to. If a client calls, take your eye off that monitor, put the smartphone down, and listen to what they're saying. If you walk into their home, stop thinking about the jerk on the freeway or anything else that's running through your head, and sit there and tell yourself, most important person in the world. If you started doing that today, practice that little exercise within a week or 2, you would almost automatically increase your ability to focus when and if you need it. That's one simple thing you can do. Here's a second simple thing you can do. And strangely enough, it harks back to the toy again. All these little smartphones you folks carry around in your purses and in your pockets all have programmable timers on them. Every single one of them you can program to either buzz you, ring you, make a sound, chime, vibrate, something. Why not sit down and program these devices to make a noise or vibrate every 2 or 3 minutes? And when you hear the sound or when you feel the vibration every 2 or 3 minutes, just for the next couple days, stop when you become aware of that vibration or that sound and ask yourself a simple question. What was I just thinking? What was just floating through my head? Here we are 2-3 minutes later, what am I thinking now? A few minutes later, what am I thinking now? Now, if you actually did this for a couple days, some of you are going to be shocked at what pops out. I'll give you some common examples. There are dozens of different examples, but here's a very common thing that will happen. People do this. They make it ring a sound or make a ringtone or a chime. And after the end of the first or second day, one guy called me up and he said, the strangest thing is I worry all the time. For years, my spouse has been telling me I'm a worrier, and I never believed it. I believe it now. Every single time that stupid sound came out, I was worrying about something. I'd be on my way to the appointment worrying that the client wasn't going to be there. The client was there. A few minutes later, I felt the vibration. I'm worrying the client's not going to do any business with me. They do business with me. A few minutes later, I'm driving back, I'm worrying the client's going to call and change their mind. Caught myself sitting at the table last night worrying because I didn't have anything to worry about. I have a problem. One other person said, strangest thing, I'm always putting myself down. Every single time that noise came out of that phone, I was kind of beating myself over the head. What do you mean? Well, I should have done this. Why didn't I ask for referrals? Why did I just sell an investment? Why didn't I talk to them about insurance? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I make more phone calls today? Why did I say that to that person? I'm kind of always second-guessing myself, always putting myself down. Now, I made this sound negative. Here's what I hope most of you find. Most of you, if you hear that little timer, that little noise, hopefully you'll catch yourself thinking, next year I'm going to managing partners. Or, next year I'm going to have one of those rings on my finger. Or, this day I'm devoting entirely to doing what's best for my clients. Or I think the economy's great and getting better. If you catch yourself thinking thoughts like that all the time, turn the timer off, you're doing fine. You're probably well on your way to being a tremendous success in this or any business. But if you don't like what pops out, that's when I think you ought to keep that timer going, and every time you catch yourself thinking something negative or counterproductive, stop just for a second and replace it with the thought you want. Guide your thinking is a second technique. And if you don't like that, here's a third. And this is what you've all been waiting for, so I'll cut to the chase. I know most, if not all of you in here know that I'm known in the business as a motivational hypnotist. Why in the world would I want to be hypnotized? Well, it turns out hypnosis is a very common state of mind, and it is one that is pure focus, absolute, perfect focus. The technical name for it is response attentiveness. The most common example of it is the everyday daydream. You ever see someone in the office? Totally focused, staring out into space, not really hearing what's going on around them, not really listening to anything. Mentally, their mind is, as they say, 1,000,000 miles away, completely focused, maybe on the vacation they're about to take or some daydream that they have. Pure and effortless focus. You ever come out of your car at the end of the day, walk into your home, open the door, there's a member of your family in a trance? Ever see a kid on a video game? Total focus. Absolutely 100% of their attention, effortlessly focused. Now, I say the word hypnosis, people get nervous. They're a little bit afraid of it because of what they've seen on movies or TV. Turns out the average person in this room is already spending about 70% of their waking day in a trance anyhow. I'm just going to show you how to put it to some good use tonight. And you think it's crazy, but it's really true. Wouldn't it be nice at the end of each day, if you wanted to, we could just shut it all down, stop the mind from going at 800 miles an hour, let the tension in your body go, and simply focus on a goal? Well, if you did that, if you were able to do that, you could repeatedly visualize an image and drive that image into your subconscious mind. You listen to successful people. Now, I admit that I'm biased, but I've come to some conclusions after doing this for 32 years. One is that virtually every successful, long-term successful person I've ever encountered is practicing some form of self-hypnosis. They don't call it that, but that's what they're doing. They don't say, I learned how to hypnotize myself 20 years ago, go into a hypnotic state 3 times. That's not the way they talk. They'll say, when I first started in this business, I'd really never sold a thing before, didn't have that much experience, didn't have a whole lot going for me, but I remember when I started with this business, I had a vision, I had a dream, I could see myself doing really good things in this business. I go to work every day driving a beat-up old car because it's all I could afford, but I used to cut out pictures of Mercedes, put them on the dashboard. There's the Mercedes out in the parking lot. Always knew I was going to be a Mercedes person. My spouse and I used to drive around successful people's neighborhoods. We used to fantasize about what kind of home we were going to build once we made it, once we got the money. See that big, beautiful house out there? We built that house in our head long before we broke ground on it. See, people hypnotize themselves all the time. Sometimes it's negative. I'm going to show you how to do it in a positive way. I'm going to show you how to hypnotize yourselves. And I'm going to do that by way of demonstration. In other words, in the next few moments, I'm going to bring a few of you up out of the audience and literally hypnotize you, show you in living color what this is really all about. Before I do that, I always have to make some promises so you understand what's going on. Here's promise number 1. You do not have to come up here and do this if you don't want to. I'm going to do some tests that help me find the good subjects. And if I come out off this stage and invite you to join me up on stage in the next few minutes and you do not want to be hypnotized, please don't be shy. Just give me a hand signal or wave me on. I'll move on to someone else. I'm not going to drag you up here kicking and screaming. But if you do come up here, here's promise number 2. You're not going to be humiliated. You're not going to do pole dancing or quacking like ducks or anything. This is Edward Jones, and I'm on a tight leash tonight. I had a list of things I'm not allowed to do tonight. but obviously, there's nothing going to be crazy or obscene or anything like that. Everything I do, by the way, carries with it a message. I don't hypnotize people just for the fun of it. I'm going to show you a series of hypnotic phenomena, and I'm going to do my best to describe to the rest of you what it is you're seeing and how what it is you're seeing is very, very similar to some things you do in business. You really can become your own worst enemy sometimes by setting up some limitations, by not being able to see the big picture, or by not being able to plow through obstacles. Just by way of survey, I know that I have spoken to this group a number of years before, but how many of you in this audience tonight have never actually seen someone hypnotized up close and personal? Can I see by show of hands? At least half of you. Fasten your seatbelts. If you've not ever seen this, get ready, because it's an eye-opener at the very least. I have been doing this for 32 years now professionally, and quite honestly, it still amazes me. I still find myself often up here scratching my head saying, that's just incredible. How do they do that? Wait till you see what some of you folks are capable of. But no one, I promise, will be humiliated or embarrassed. Promise number 3, whoever does come up here, I can pretty well promise by the end of the presentation, you will be extremely relaxed. It's one of the side effects of the technique. For those of you who do not end up on stage, if you observe those who do end up here, you will see that I'm guiding them, and that's all I'm doing is guiding them into a state of mental as well as physical relaxation. And let's face it, some of you folks have not relaxed in years. Some of you go to bed worrying about things, wake up first thing, go back to worrying again. You run around all day gritting your teeth, curling your toes, tensing up your stomach muscles, popping antacids, taking headache pains, and Valium. The state of mind up here is total relaxation, which is why invariably people will come out of this state and they comment, I feel great. I feel like I just slept 10 solid hours, like I had a full body massage. One guy came up not too long ago, this is better than drugs, and it is. Although, of course, I would have no way of knowing, but it is a wonderful feeling, and it simply has to do with the technique of total relaxation. So, again, these are my 3 promises. Don't have to do this if you don't want to. If I identify you as a good subject and you don't want to be hypnotized, just let me know. Number 2, if you do come up here, I promise you will not be humiliated. Promise number 3, if you end up here, you're probably going to be real relaxed by the end of it. What I need to do next are find some good hypnotic subjects. Those of you who are familiar with the bell curve, and by the way, how many of you folks are familiar with the bell curve? Can I see by show of hands? You all should be since you make your living from it, but that's a totally different lecture. Nonetheless, the bell curve should not surprise you that in a random large group such as this, statistically, you would expect about 5 to 10% of you to be really good subjects right out of the gate. Typically, it's a numbers game. About 1 out of 10 people are extraordinary subjects the very first time you try to hypnotize them. About 68% of you, by definition, are going to be average subjects, and another 5 to 10% of you are going to be difficult, all the way up to about 2.14% who cannot be hypnotized for all intents and purposes. Now, if I had a choice, who do you think I would want up here as my subjects? Obviously, I'm going to be focusing on that 5 to 10%. Let me make a comment about that because I always get this question. Why are some people better than others? Why can some people just kind of dive into this state of mind and, I'm just getting average results from it? Well, I probably will not know any of the folks I bring up here, but if you interview the folks that end up here later this evening, you will probably discover that they have all been practicing some form of self-hypnosis, just not calling it that. Time and time again, when I get a great subject up here, I might ask them afterwards, have you ever been hypnotized? And they almost invariably say, not only have I never been hypnotized, I'd have bet the farm it was impossible to hypnotize me. No, I've never been hypnotized, but I used to wrestle in high school, and I had a way you could tune out pain. I'd get myself so focused before a match. And when you had me hypnotized, it was like I was back in that state of mind I used to put myself in when I was a wrestler. One person said I was a long-distance runner. I could get myself so focused I could run for miles, stay focused on the finish line. Afterwards, my legs hurt like crazy, but while I was running, it was just that finish line. It was kind of like when you had me up there, I was back doing that again. A guy not too long ago said, I had an imaginary friend till I was 15. Does that count? Good subject. Some of you don't realize it, but you've been hypnotizing yourselves for years. So yes, there is a practice effect. The reason I mention that is if you do not end up here, that doesn't mean you can't be hypnotized. It just means these folks have had a little bit more practice at it than you have. And if you like what you see tonight and would like to learn how to do it, it is not difficult to do. It only takes about 5 minutes a day. And one of the side effects of learning this technique is, again, you learn how to spend more and more time when you want to focused. So if you do find yourself sitting face-to-face with a client, you can learn to push all that other garbage out of your head and focus on that client's wants and needs. There really are practical applications to this technique. Although tonight, you're going to see a demonstration that if you've not ever seen one before, is probably going to be quite an eye-opener. All right, now, what I got to do is find some good hypnotic subjects. And there are literally hundreds of what are called suggestibility tests, little visualization tests you can do with groups. There are, however, two that I have used throughout my career. Each of them takes 5 minutes or less. These two little visualization tests will tell all of us who that 5 to 10% of the really good subjects are. Would you folks be willing to take these two little tests with me? Of course you would. Let's do the first. The first is